Hey leaders, in this episode of Leading Collaborative Response, Lorna and I are joined by Chris Zottl. Chris is the principal of Sunrise School in Grasslands Public Schools, an alternative school for students in junior and senior high, with the goal of seeing success for students who may have had trouble finding that success in a traditional school setting. Chris and his team have established an exemplary culture of response and collaboration, which requires rethinking what it may mean when we define success for all learners. So let's get started.
Are you a leader who is navigating the nuances of leading collaborative response in your school or district? Are you unsure of what collaborative response is? Are you looking to understand the critical role leadership plays when establishing and refining a collaborative response approach?
Collaborative response began as a grassroots approach to focus on the needs of students through a framework of collaboration. That approach has grown to a movement that is training leadership and education.
Through the Leading Collaborative Response podcast, Kurtis and I share our own experiences of leading collaborative response and lessons learned as we continue to learn and gain insight through the experiences of working alongside others. We also have the opportunity to engage in conversations with school and divisional leaders implementing the framework in their own organizations.
We know great leaders build great teams because that is what every child deserves. Subscribe to the Leading Collaborative Response podcast and join the thousands of schools seeing success for students through intentional and focused collaborative efforts.
Welcome to episode 41 of Leading Collaborative Response. I'm Lorna Hewson, co-founder and lead learner of Collaborative Response.
And I'm Kurtis Hewson. Today we're joined by Chris Zottl, principal of Sunrise School in Grasslands Public Schools in Southeast Alberta, Canada. Chris, great to have you join us here today.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
All right, so we're going to get you to describe Sunrise in a little bit, as it's located in the community of Brooks, Alberta, and serves a number of students in person as well as online. But before we jump into where we're going with this episode's around what collaborative response looks like in a unique school setting, can you please start off with just sharing a little bit about your journey as an educator and give our listeners and viewers a bit of a understanding of who is Chris Zottl, the current principal of Sunrise?
Absolutely, I can. I was born and raised in Edmonton. I started my educational career there. I did a year at U of A, which we try not to forget about and not talk about anymore. But after taking another year to grow myself and learn why I wanted to get into school still and do stuff, I went back to Concordia College and did a couple years there with the plan of getting into education. At which time my lovely wife had graduated from OT school and told me she was moving to the States and taking a job there, and I could either come with her or maintain a home by myself in Edmonton. So I moved to the States, traveled around for a bit, and finally we settled in Cedar City, Utah, where I finished my degree at Southern Utah University in Cedar City. I did a dual major in special ed and elementary ed, and taught 1 year in Utah once I graduated, did a K-4 school where I was the special ed lead instructor for that school. And then we decided it was time to move back to Canada, applied for a number of positions here and wound up with the Christ Redeemer District in Brooks, ran their special ed program for their senior high, which at the time only went to grade 11. And then my second year with them, I took a grade 5 classroom. So I was settled in it, and I applied for a job with Grasslands and moved out to Rolling Hills School. I had always said I wanted to be in special ed or I wanted to be in elementary. I did not want to teach junior high, and I wound up as a junior high instructor for the next 11 years.
As soon as you say it, that's what.
Yep.
Yeah, that's right.
Exactly. I tell people that all the time. No, don't say you'll never do this, because that's what you're going to be at. So finished 11 years in Rolling Hills, was very comfortable out there, loved the school, loved that environment, taught all sorts of subjects, did get to run special ed out there, lots of phys ed, and then started my journey as an administrator. So I moved from there to Duchess School, just outside of Brooks, which is a K-12, and did my first year as a VP out there. I was just filling in for mat leave, so I only got 1 year before they moved me, and I took over as VP at Eastbrook Elementary. which is right in Brooks, a very large elementary school, K-6 program. And I worked for 4 years there as a VP before assuming the role here at Sunrise. And I'm now in year 6 as principal here at the Sunrise, which is our alternative or outreach school for Grasslands.
So this sounds like you had it mapped out right from
Pretty
age
straightforward.
18 of exactly where you were going to
Knew
go.
exactly what I was doing and where I was going and followed it to a T.
Uh,
Oh, that's awesome.
I do have to say you made the right choice when it comes to you can stay and do this, or you can follow along and figure it out. Well
I
done.
absolutely did. Have never regretted it for a second. We're celebrating our 30th wedding anniversary this upcoming December, and I've never looked back.
Oh,
She might have questioned a few times as it took me a little longer to get through than I had planned, but she hung on, and it's worked out well for both of us.
Oh, that's so awesome. Well, Chris, we know that that Sunrise School and the community of Brooks are really unique contexts, and we'd love for you to share with our listeners a little bit about both Sunrise and the situation there at Sunrise, and then the context of Brooks, because there is a different type of area there.
The
And
demographics
yeah,
than what
yeah.
would someone would expect to find in a southern Alberta community. Maybe start with Brooks and then lead into.
Yeah, I was going to say I'll work backwards from that.
Yeah,
Start with
sure.
Brooks. Working at the elementary school at Eastbrook, it is one of our most diverse schools. It's certainly the most diverse of the elementary schools. And Brooks is unique, as you said. We have a meat processing plant just outside of town that is the largest employer in the county, and they bring immigrant workers in from all across the world. And every year it seems like it's a different area of the world. They are coming from Somalia, Eritrea, from the Ukraine, from the Philippines. And so these students are coming from everywhere. So I know there was a documentary done on Brooks not that long
Yeah.
ago that was talked about. It's the city of 100 hellos because there are so many different dialects and languages spoken here. So Eastbrook was super, super diverse. Our junior high, because of that, the junior high here in Brooks becomes very, very diverse, as is the high school, where you have so many languages, kids from all over the world that you can't possibly cover everything that's there. Grasslands has a few interpreters that cover lots of it, and I'm always amazed at how many languages some of our students, parents, and the translators speak and what they can do. But yeah, you can walk through the hallway and in a single classroom, you might have 25 different languages being spoken. So extremely, extremely diverse, which is very unique to Southern Alberta. It's not very common. Brooks itself also has the surrounding areas of the county of Newell, which a number of those small communities, Rolling Hills being one when I worked there, where we have a lot of Mexican Mennonites as well. So a lot of low German speaking people. And we battle with trying to keep them in school because they don't value education the same way that we as Canadian citizens have. So it's a very unique area and presents a lot of unique issues and challenges for Grasslands to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, looking at Sunrise ourselves as an alternative school, we have really tried to grow this program. As I said, this is my 6th year here. We've just about doubled our on-site population of students in that time, just because of the need for students and to run a program like ours. So myself and our assistant superintendent have gone around to a couple of different areas, Black Gold and places like that, to take a look at their programs and how they're running them. And we feel very unique here again because our outreach program is one of the very few that actually has on-site attendance-based programming for both junior high and high school. Most of them, if they run an on-site, it's only for junior high. Once they get to high school, it is all done through distance ed, either online learning or distance type modules. So we have an on-site. We run a grade 7 to 9 program with just over 25 students in it this year. And then we run an on-site high school program as well. Again, around that 24 students that are attendance-based have to come on a daily basis, and we teach them all their core subjects. In junior high, they obviously get taught everything, but high school, they then move into a distance kind of situation for anything that is not a core subject.
But all the cores are taught.
Yes, we do teach all the cores, assuming that they want to take what we are offering. And that's we're coming across now with some of the things that we're doing with the collaborative response have been really helpful this year because we're faced with a situation where like I said, when I took over 6 years ago, we might have one student graduate a year. Lots of them didn't really worry about finishing. It was more to get them whatever we could to get into something. But as you know, having a high school diploma is getting more and more important for students. But we're also seeing our students really now starting to push to actually go to post-secondary, to get into trades or even into universities, which was never an issue for us before. So we taught, for example, we've always taught math 10-3, and then the social and English -2, science 14-24. We never worried about some of the higher academic courses, but we now have students who are requiring those to go on to post-secondary. So we're trying to slowly shift what we can do. There's some things we can have them work at our sister school, Brooks Composite High School, which is right next door to us, to do some of those. But a lot of our students still want to be in our building. So we're trying to work those pieces out.
Well, when I was out at your school a few weeks ago, Chris, you and I had talked about that dual edge of the sword of it's fantastic that we're seeing the success that we're having, but then it also leads to the challenges that come with that success of more students seeing the program as a viable option, more demands coming from your students in regards to the opportunities that are afforded to them, and then the successes you're seeing for some students then breeds further success, which brings back around to where we're going today, around why having a collaborative response mindset is so incredibly important for the school. So why don't we move into that a little bit? And even though we know you've got a small team at the school, and I'll get you to describe who that team involves, I was really impressed with the layers of collaboration that you have established in regards to collaborative structures and processes. So can you describe for our listeners and viewers what's been established at Sunrise and the purpose of each when you think about our Thursday meetings, our Friday meetings, the one-on-one student conversation, and then even the school support team meeting that you're looking to infuse into next year? Sorry, we'll back up. Let's maybe start with your staff team, just to give us a bit of a sense.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So our staff currently there are 4 full-time teachers on staff who teach in the building where I'm located right now with our on-site program. And then they help with the distance ed program as well, which is kind of our third program that we have going, where we have high school students who do need a real distance program. So for various reasons, and I won't go into all of that because we're looking at the staff piece, but we have those 4. And then we have 2 additional staff who work out at Medicine Hat College, as we have a building that's considered Sunrise Collegiate that runs upgrading for college students as well. So they morph very well from our distance ed program or on-site program into some of those upgrading things. So those 2 ladies, and they spend some time here helping with our distance ed as well. So ultimately there would be 6 full-time teaching staff, or 5.5 teaching staff, and then myself as well, with a bit of a teaching load on there. We also this year have 3 full-time EAs who work right on site here with our programs. The one admin assistant who manages everything up front, and she's actually been with Sunrise since it began, and I know she's threatening to retire, and when she does, we are going to be in serious trouble because she knows everything. And then we also run a wellness mentor who is here 4 days a week to help kids with that piece of it, that social part, to discuss and have one-on-one stuff or group things as needed. And we run a full nutrition program. So we have a caterer on site 4 mornings a week who prepares a hot lunch for the students every single day. So, and that's our staff.
Yeah. And before we get to the second part of that question I asked, I do need to let our listener and Lorna know as well. You mentioned 4 days for the hot lunch. Chris then, along with members of staff, do the reheating of leftovers for Friday so that lunch can be done. The day I was in there, Chris spent a majority of the later morning prepping for that, and I got
You never knew you'd be a chef too.
and I got
But I love it. I've always loved being in the kitchen. So I volunteered for that position. I said, I'm not teaching a class now. I can manage this piece. So
Oh, that's awesome.
there's not many schools that I go in to help provide support, and part of that includes drying dishes. So that was
yeah.
fantastic.
Okay, I did appreciate you washing those dishes up for me because I hate the washing. So I was happy to dry and put them away, Kurtis.
Oh,
Awesome.
that's so awesome.
Okay, so let's go to layers of team. How does that set up for you in the school?
Yeah. So I have to give a shout out to my predecessor. Kathy Fox was running the program when she retired and I took over, and she already had our first layer in there, which we call our Thursday morning meetings. And so those were already set up. Staff would come at 8 o'clock in the morning, and we'd have a good half hour before the bell went. And it encompassed all of our staff except for the secretary and the caterer. But all our EAs come to those meetings, as does our wellness mentor. And those meetings were established to just talk about kids. It was to do individual, who has problems with what's going on, who needs help with the child, what are the issues they're facing. And it was a way that we could all share that information and stay in the same loop and know what was going on.
So very much about just ensuring heightened level of awareness.
Absolutely. And when I came to the building, one of the things that I did is I met the June before I was going to start and talked with all the staff and just asked them 3 brief questions. I said, what's the one program going at Sunrise that I cannot touch and needs to stay exactly where it is? What's the one thing that if you could change, you'd tell me here, this would be a good change to make? And then what's the one thing I have to know about Sunrise to make myself successful? And when it came to that first question, what's the one thing that has to stay in place? They all talked about that communication as a staff, the things like the Thursday morning meetings where everybody gets to share and be in the know. The EAs felt that was so important that it wasn't just the wellness mentor who knew what was going on or the teachers. Now, we obviously have layers. The wellness mentor doesn't share things that are confidential, but the things that need to be out there, we all discuss. And I became aware very quickly during those Thursday morning meetings that our EAs were getting information from students that they would never share with teachers, that they would never share with the wellness mentor. And so they were giving us such vital information that made everybody's job so much easier. So as Grasslands went into booking you guys and getting more into the collaborative response model, I felt like Sunrise was already started that work. We had those things in place. And as that evolved a little bit over the last few years, and we started looking at, okay, so with this collaborative response model, we need to look a little bit less about individual students and more about groups and pedagogy and what you can do in your classroom that will help a number of students. We talked about that at Sunrise and said, that's yes, and we're willing to do that. But my staff were unwilling to give up those Thursday morning meetings. And so we have continued to do those with great success. We just have a Google document with every child's name and the dates, and we have someone each meeting who takes notes. And as soon as a child gets talked about, in it goes. All the staff have access to that so they can pop back to remember, what did we discuss? Where are we at? And yes, I mean, I understand sometimes we do wind up talking about the same student week after week, but those meetings are less about, okay, let's problem solve and what do we need to fix, but more about, here's the information you need to know. Here's what's going on in this student's life and why it might look like A right now or why B is not happening. And we share that stuff, and it's just been so vital to the success in our building. And I think it just allows us all to know our kids so well.
So to paraphrase that, those Thursday meetings are about enhanced communication and awareness, but you said we don't always get to the problem solving and what are the actions that we're going to take. So let's then talk about what does that look like then as you, like you said, we had this initial layer already established. How could we then build upon it?
We'll be right back to continue this episode. We have all felt like this before when engaging in team meetings, feeling like our time is not being maximized or that this could have just been an email. As a leader, how can we ensure this is not the reality for everyone in the room? Rather than just simply coming together into a shared space, we really need to ensure that whenever we are engaging as a team in meetings, that the time is being utilized to its utmost and that we are truly seeing impact as a result of our conversations. My name is Kurtis Hewson, lead learner and co-founder of Jigsaw Learning. In this free on-demand webinar, I'm going to be sharing with you 5 planning considerations and then 5 facilitation considerations that you can put into place as a leader to take your team meetings to the next level. Access this webinar, and in addition to these 10 considerations, numerous free resources will be shared that you can begin using immediately. I can't wait to have you join me to learn how we can ensure that team meetings are having their optimal impact. And now back to our conversation.
So that's what happened. And when Grasslands booked you guys in and we started going through this as admin more closely, I realized that there was a shift we needed to make. And we've been doing that over the last few years. it was a little bit slow to start with staff. I said, I've talked to lots of my admin partners and said, I felt like Sunrise was way far ahead in this race when we started with Jigsaw, when you guys came in and started meeting with admin. And then all of a sudden I felt like we were behind everybody because I was trying to convince staff we should change the model we had. By leaving those Thursday morning meetings alone, I think staff decided, okay, we can get on board with this. And we started doing kind of every 6 weeks, we would run a formal CRM meeting on our Friday afternoons. I'd send out pre-meeting agendas. We would have an agenda for that meeting, and we'd have every staff member had to identify kids that were successes, so we could start a meeting with those successes, just like your template shows us, and then kids that they felt were having an issue. And so what they do now, and that was something that Marilyn had talked to me about when I met with her through your company, was instead of just sending out one pre-meeting organizer, send one to everyone individually, because I was finding one of the issues I was having is I'd send out one and the same 2 teachers would write some stuff in, and the other 4 would look and go, oh, well, there's stuff on there, so I don't need to worry about it now. And I expressed that concern to Marilyn. She's like, why don't you do one per teacher and see what happens? And so now I get all 6 of them replying. Then before the meeting, I go through and I kind of cull through them and I look for what are some commonalities around them. What's an area we could look at? So in the end, we wind up with a list of like 15 kids, but they're all looking at, we're struggling with getting them to stay in class, or we're struggling with getting them to start the day on time, whatever those things are. So that becomes our overarching, what we're looking at. So when we meet on the Friday afternoons, those are where those discussions go. And we're starting to talk more about pedagogy and what they're doing in the classroom, as opposed to this will help Johnny. And I think teachers have really started to buy into that, so that now we're seeing when we come up with those action plans and have real specific things to do, it's affecting these 8 kids in that area rather than just John.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really liked, Chris, when you were explaining that idea of getting an understanding ahead of time of what are some of the key issues to then synthesize for them. But then I also, you were talking about as a leader, it gives you a little bit of mental preparation of what's coming, so that when we get into that conversation, I might have some things at the ready for possible strategies or suggestions, or maybe I'm going to touch base with somebody just before the meeting because this key issue is coming up and I need to make sure that they express this strategy that I know they're using effectively.
Yeah, it really helps me. I mean, Grasslands is really, and I think this is the way across education right now, as a school leader, really work on that instructional leadership portion of that. And that's exactly what it does. It allows me to recognize, I mean, I might see something in a classroom, I'm like, oh, if this teacher is really struggling with this, how can I support that? What can I do to help them along the way that might be outside of our collaborative response meeting, but also have some ideas there? And like you said, Kurtis, there's also that I can go to other staff and go, this is going to come up on Friday, and I know you're doing this in your classroom. Can you make sure you talk about that? Because it'll be excellent for everyone else to hear.
Yeah, excellent. Well, and then, so in Grasslands, you're able to do those meetings on your Fridays due to a divisional early dismissal, but that's not happening every Friday. What are some of the other ways that you utilize that Friday time that's available within Grasslands?
So yeah, so we do them every 6 weeks, just because then we want to try, and this is the area we're trying to really work on within Sunrise itself, is when we have those action plans now, what data are we collecting to show that 6 weeks from now, what we've done is making a difference, or conversely isn't, and maybe we need to scrap that and try something different. So that gives us 6 weeks to collect things and discuss and see where we're going with those. In between, one of those Fridays every month is a divisional one where they're planning things for the division. So this year, Grasslands has done a ton of stuff on the new curriculum implementation. As I said, with such a diverse population here, our EAL stuff is big to push. So we've had someone come in and discuss EAL with the group and do those things. So they will plan lots of those things out. We've done some CEVA training for our group. That's really important within our building. So things like that get planned at the district level, and we've got 2 coaches who help organize that with our PD committee chair, and they set all those things aside and get that done. And then the other weeks we have are for collaborative planning or team planning. So within our building, because it's such a small group, we typically will break into 2. our two collegiate employees will quite often do their own thing in their building because what they're looking over is so completely different than what we're doing. It's no longer public education. It's now looking at getting kids ready for university. So they have a different outlook on what they're doing. They will join us at times if there's things that we're doing that are pertinent to them, but a lot of it, they work on their own things and report back to me. Whereas on site here, we're working on whatever things we have. So this year we had a large focus on creating a new mission vision for our school. We've talked about it for the last 6 years. We didn't like the one that was in place. Didn't feel it really matched what we were doing anymore. So we wanted to fix that. But it also gives us time to work on whatever other things we're doing. So sometimes after our Friday CRM meeting, when we've got some action plans, the next week will allow us to do a little bit of collaborative planning around, okay, here's something we discussed we were going to do. How are we going to do this as a group? What can we put together? So it gives us that collaborative planning time. Grasslands has been very, very good about those things need to be really intentional of what we're doing with our time. These Friday afternoons can't be just, oh, it's free time for teachers. That's not what it was meant to do. And when they approached our parent group about we'd like to do this and have Friday afternoons for your students to be off, they had to be aware teachers were not taking that time off. It would be deliberate PD time for us. So that's what we've been able to use it for. And it gives the teachers the opportunity to do that. I think in a small building, we've been very good at this from the very beginning because you're seeing everyone teaches the same students all day long. We see each other. We're in each other's faces all the time. So we were constantly having those informal discussions. This has just allowed us to make things a little bit more formal, which as a principal certainly helps me because then I know things are getting done rather than just believing they're getting done.
So it's really exciting, both on the fact that you have those Fridays. I'm sure there's lots of our listeners who would be a little bit jealous about that, but I love the intentionality behind it too, that it does give you lots of opportunities to be able to bring staff together. And these are things that you are needing to do anyway, whether it's staff meeting or putting a priority around professional learning, that you're going to do those anyway, but this way you have the time embedded for you on the Fridays, which is really quite wonderful for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. It makes a little bit more work as an administrator. You have to plan those things. You have to have everything in place, and there's accountability to it because the board is so intent on making sure that we are not letting these things become fluff. They need to have some intentionality and purpose. But I think the payout in the end, now that we've only done one complete year, but it is going to continue next year. So I think we recognize the payout there, and it is very beneficial for us. So
Yeah, that's great. That allows for that layering of teams too that we've just talked about. So, Chris, as a junior senior alternate setting, what are some of the other additions or adjustments that you've made within your collaborative response at your school?
Well, I think one of the things that I talked with Kurtis about this when he was here visiting, I mean, we're looking at especially some of the things like the next layer, that learning support team meetings. That's something that for a couple of years, I was the learning support. We were short some people and didn't get someone hired in that. So I was just running it myself. And as I said, I had a special ed background, so I was really passionate about that. But then when we had someone who stepped into it the last couple of years, we were just having lots of informal meetings. We were constantly talking about these things and discussing, but nothing was intentional. It was just we would meet after school and he would be like, hey, I'm struggling with this. Can you help me? And we'd figure things out and, spitball together and figure them out. So one of the things that we started this year, but is one real goal for next year as we have a new learning support teacher again, is doing the same types of things, having pre-meeting agendas, having, organizers ahead of time, and then having that agenda in the same format we're running all of our other things together to allow us to meet. It won't take the place of us getting together and talking consistently. In a small building, you're never going to get rid of that, and I don't want to. I mean, I've really built my career on building those relationships with staff, students, parents, and that's one of the pieces. But I think having that intentionality again and really focusing on that just allows us to tie all these pieces together. So when we look at what we've discussed in a Friday CRM, now my learning support teacher taking lead on that is able to meet with me and discuss, okay, what are the things you and I can now do as that next level to help support the teachers through this? What are the things that they need from us? Or what other ideas do we have, knowing that these are the struggles that our teachers are having right now? So that's kind of the goal for next year, to really make that more intentional. And then Grasslands themselves have done that when we go into the support services meetings, when we look at, okay, we want to look outside our building and get some of these next layers of things that what for our building becomes really tier 4. Our tiers of support really look a little different because tier 1, 2, and 3 are really done internally, where tier 1 and 2 are just absolutely common in our building. Tier 3, we cover a lot of ourselves. So tier 4 is when we step outside. And by having the support services meetings, being able to go to them with, here's what we've discussed in our CRMs, here's what we've discussed in our LST meetings. We can share those agendas with them so they see what's been discussed about kids or pedagogy and where we're at, so that when we need help from our school psychologist or from the division team, from an OT or a speech, we have all of that data already in place for them and can just hand it to them and say, here's what it is. When we meet on Tuesday, this is a kid we need some help with, but here's what we've already done. Here's where we're already at.
Yeah.
And we put in there the things like our continuum, and here are the things we've tried. And one of the things we've discussed in our building is, I mean, trying something on the continuum isn't, well, I tried it on Tuesday, it didn't work, so we scrapped it. You have to give this a good solid try, which is where that 6-week window comes. We try these things for a good period of time. Some of them won't work, and that's okay, but you have to give it a solid effort. We're able to present that to the division team so that they can then help us to that next level of what we need going forward.
Yeah.
Chris, that
Sorry, go ahead.
it's so amazing that all I continue to hear as you're talking about your work is that idea of support, whether it's supporting students or whether that's supporting adults in your building and accessing support from the district. It's all about, creating those opportunities for support. And that's a beautiful thing.
Mhm. I also, I often see within schools of course, informally, we're talking, we're collaborating, especially in a building your size. You can't walk down that main corridor without bumping into 3 people as you go. Of course, you're going to be chatting all the time, but when you put in some of the formalized structures,
Yeah.
it just takes it to that next level. It doesn't replace, nor should it, but I've yet to have a school that said when we introduced formalized structures, our informal collaboration took a negative hit. It always comes with,
It actually goes the other way.
it goes the other way.
Yeah,
100%.
it enhances it.
100%. That's what we found. And I know, I mean, I talked with you, Kurtis, about this quite a bit this year when you were here, is that next level for us is that data, because so much of it has been informal. We haven't collected the data. We know, and we intuitively know where the kids are going and if things are working, but to actually be able to prove that is not always as easy. And so this allows us, when it is so intentional, when you know what you're doing, you formalized it, it allows us to really gather more data and put that in place and let the data be the one driving where we're going, as opposed to, well, I just have this feeling that this is what's happening with Sally. It's, here's what we've seen and here's the data to prove it. Now, what are we going to do about it? And then we can see as well. I mean, we have, in my 6 years here, we've tried 100 different things for behavioral. We've tried all different approaches, incentive programs and, punishment programs and all sorts of things across the sky. But when we have that data prove this is what's working, our attendance is a great example of that. As an alternative school, attendance was something that we really struggled with. And we decided to go in with an incentive program that would cost us money. But at the end of every month, when we look at our attendance, and we give kids a monetary award, either a Slurpee or a lunch out based on their attendance, we have seen our attendance records go so much better. And we still have the one-offs of those kids that we can't get in our building or can't get to come consistently. And you have to work with those individually. But as a group, I mean, our attendance has gone from, 12 kids missing 50% of the school year to we have 1 kid who's missing that. And the rest are here and missing 5 to 10% of the school year, which we all know is just going to benefit those kids.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
amazing.
So you spoke of your collaborative structures and processes and how the data and evidence not only informs who we should be focusing on, but also do we know if what we're doing is having impact? Can you just describe quickly, Chris, what the continuum of support work looks like in the school right now?
Sure. We've built 2 continuums for our building, one on behavior and one on academics. We've we started 6 years ago. We totally redid them with the group that I was working with then, and we've rejigged them twice since. This year was a big change again, because like I said, we had built everything on a 3-tier model because we figured tier 1 and 2 were just combined for us. The district asked me to put it back out to 4 to mesh better with the Jigsaw model and to keep things going. But we've also changed from having a real pyramid shape, and you can see them over my shoulder there. We went from the real pyramid to more of, it's more of a kind of a diamondy shape where we branch out as we go a little bit further and then back into the top tier where you're going to have fewer and fewer kids involved. But it's one of those things where we have built those, and then I think I was telling Kurtis this the other day. Originally, I planned on just putting them. I was going to get a graphic designer here in town, put them on a great big, nice poster size stuff and hang them up in every classroom, but then realized quickly that'd be a waste of money, because if they're going to be effective, we want to continually change them and keep working on them. And so what we've introduced this year that we just got started, and actually Kurtis was at our first meeting where we did that, is we now have a continuum curator at our CRM meetings, who their whole responsibility during that meeting is to check off some of the things as people talk about them. Here's what we're trying, to spout out a few ideas of, oh, have you tried this that's on our continuum, and remind people of those things, or to add to the continuum those things that as people come up with ideas, go, oh, that's something we need to add into our continuum now. So they're just constantly evolving and changing. It also allows us to remove ones. There are things that we no longer do in our district, so cross those off. They don't need to be there, right? So it's just an evolving thing where we're hoping that teachers are using this all the time and going back and forth to it as needed.
Well, and representative of the actual practice that's happening in your building.
Yeah. We want them to be very authentic.
Yeah, absolutely. So Chris, you did speak a little bit to the systems approach that all schools in Grasslands are taking around this work. Can you just share a little bit on, what it has looked like? Like, what have been some of the things that have happened from a divisional perspective that you think have had an impact for you as a leader? And then, of course, a secondary impact for the students and staff in your building.
Yeah, so I think the first thing with Grasslands is, because Division Office bought into this and brought you guys down to talk with us every few months over the last number of years, they've led by example, and that's been big for us. So when we get together once a month as administrators and have the meeting with central office, during our PD portion of it in the mornings, we always have time to do CRMs as a group. So we're put into groups together. So as the alternative junior high and high school, I work with the Brooks High School and the Brooks Junior High, and the 3 buildings get together, and we have our own CRM, and we follow the same things. We have to do a pre-meeting organizer, and some months they tell us, here's what I want you guys to focus on, give us ideas based on this. Sometimes it's just, what is your issue right now that you need to fix or solve? And then we brainstorm as a group together on that and build those. And then, as I said, like when we meet with the division team for things like the LSTs or SST school support stuff, they're running the same thing. So they give us an advanced organizer to fill out, to talk about whatever it is we need, and then they follow those formats and agendas when we meet. So I think it's just allowed consistency across the board.
Mm.
You're no longer wondering, what will this meeting look like? How will we discuss it? How will our ideas get there? Will I miss anything? It's all following the same format from everybody down. And knowing that central office is doing that, when we're meeting as a group of 3 schools for our principal's CRM, their meeting is a central office group for theirs. And they're having those same types of discussions, so that the superintendent, assistant superintendents, the school coaches, the division leaders for learning support or early learning are all in one as well, having their own discussion to discuss things they want. So I think it just allows so much consistency, and you get the same language throughout, which makes things, if you're a principal of one building, you transfer to another building between, for the next year, you already know where you're going. There's nothing, it's not like, oh, well, I don't know how this school runs this. It's run exactly the same way ours is. And there will be little nuances for sure. There is, everybody has the opportunity to tweak things a little bit for what they need in their building. Obviously, in our building, all the staff meets at one time. At the comp, when they have 40 teachers, they break into smaller groups, because you're not going to get anywhere with 40 people trying to have that same discussion, right? But you still know what you're going into. And it's the same thing for teachers. If they come to my building from somewhere else, they know what the CRM is going to look like and what the general process is going to be. And so I think that's the benefit to staff. For students, again, I think then it tells you it doesn't matter what building you are in, you are going to get the same types of supports. So it's no longer, oh, well, if you're lucky enough to be in Sunrise School, you know you're going to be supported this way. But sorry, if you're out in Rolling Hills, you might not get that support. We're all getting the same supports because we're all running the same things.
Yeah. Oh, that's so great. That's amazing things that happen within that consistency, but also being able to have that assurance that we're all working on this together and we can help each other through that too, in that networking piece as well.
And learning from one another
Yeah, for
too
sure.
becomes critically
Yeah.
important, because an issue that you may be attending in your school, another school may have already crossed that bridge or figured out a next step, and then vice versa for you to be able to share out as well.
And I think one of the nice things, and I feel like that we did in our division very well, was allowed everyone's journey to go at their own pace to start. So we weren't all forced to, oh, you all have to be here. It was everybody was moving along, and they knew that some schools like Sunrise had a jump start on some of the things. We were doing some of this already. Other schools were not there yet and didn't have as much collaboration, so they had time to do it. But there came a point where we're at now where the division has said, okay, you've all had some time to grow. This is where you need to be now. You all need to be doing these meetings. You all need to have this format. And when we meet as admin groups, we're getting the, here's what it looks like because we're doing it as an admin group. Now you need to do that same thing within your building. And so now we're all basically on the same page. There's still differences. There still are learning curves for everybody, but it makes it much simpler. And every year when you get new staff come in who aren't used to it because they come from a different division who's not doing this, they have so much support from everybody there, and they quickly fall into what this is how it is run in Grasslands. This is how this is done.
Yeah, that's super exciting. So, hey, Chris, how would you finish this statement? As a result of collaborative response, we have seen.
We'll be right back to continue this episode.
Feeling overwhelmed with the expectations being placed on teachers, leaders, and educational systems to respond to the diverse needs of our learners?
Are you wanting to take your PLCs and RTI efforts to the next level?
It definitely takes a highly coordinated framework of structures and processes to maximize the collective capacity of your team to ensure success for all students. Collaborative response is that framework.
Order your copy of our bestseller, Collaborative Response, 3 foundational components that transform how we respond to the needs of learners, which includes access to a comprehensive companion website. Join the thousands of schools using the framework to ensure high levels of success for students and staff. And now back to our conversation.
As a result of collaborative response in Sunrise, we have seen teachers getting closer together on what they are doing, collaborating more focused. And as such, I think we have seen students learning, improving. They are getting more from the staff than they used to. Everybody's moving together. So that's what I see.
Super exciting.
You know, Chris, I really want a chance to celebrate the work at Sunrise from that day I was out, and I'm going to
He
ask.
hasn't stopped talking about his visit, by the way.
That makes me feel good because I was telling Kurtis when he was here, I mean, it's one of those things where we're still isolated enough. We're doing this as a district, but we're still isolated enough that I don't know how it's going in other buildings. I don't know how other alternative schools are running it. And I felt very good about what we were doing, but there still was those nerves of having Kurtis come to go, oh, what's he going to see? Are we really where I think we are? And to get that feedback made me feel like, okay, I'm not crazy. I know what we're doing. I was very proud of our staff and what we were doing here. I feel very solid about where we're going, but to have that feedback certainly was very reassuring for me.
Well, you have lots to celebrate,
Yeah.
for sure.
So with that, Chris, I'd love for you to just share. We've got another couple questions after this, but when you think about success, can you share with our listeners and viewers one student success that really stands out for you within the school without, of course, referring to particular names?
Sure. We actually had a student who had done a few years with us here, and then wound up getting pregnant and had to take time away from school, and approached me at the beginning of this year and said, "I know that I'm going to age out at the end of this year, but I really believe getting a high school degree is super important to me. I'd like to refocus. Is there a way that we think we can make this happen?" And she came back to us with about 55 credits this year, so she needed a good 45 credits, and she also couldn't come full time because she didn't have childcare in the afternoons. And between the work that we've done with staff and how much they were willing to help her, as well as her recommitment to this, we just did our graduation last week, and she was able to walk and go through the convocation and get her fake degree from my hands. Tears were shared, and she is one exam away now from fully completing that and getting her high school diploma, which is the things that we definitely celebrate in this building. And I've got dozens of those stories with us. I mean, our kids don't come to us because they're flying through school and cruising along. They come because they need something different. And she's just one example of that.
Oh,
Well,
that's amazing. I have
yeah.
goosebumps.
And those stories that you're sharing with me, you can hear infused underneath it all as a result of staff working together, looking outside the box, having conversations, supporting but challenging each other as well, and feeling comfortable to be able to do that because no one's questioning one another's practice. We're asking hard questions because it's going to lead to good outcomes for kids.
And looking for alternative ways to accomplish what you're hoping to accomplish for these students.
And I think that's a great point as I told you before, I've really built my career around that relationship piece. And I think that's very, very important. But our staff have really just jumped on board with all that, and the safety that we feel together to be able to question each other without you feeling like you're attacking me for what I'm doing. I don't know of a meeting where any of our staff has ever felt like this is going to be combative. It is always just, if someone says, "Oh, have you tried doing this?" It's never, "Well, do you think I don't know what I'm doing?" It's, "Oh, I hadn't. That'd be a great thing. Have you done? Show me what you've done." And we've all really 100%. And I think in an alternative school, any school, you have to just buy into, we're all here for the same purpose. We all want kids to be successful. And if you work together, students will be far more successful than if you're trying to work in isolation.
Absolutely. So, Chris, we love asking this question of anyone who comes on the podcast, and it's this. In the spirit of, if you knew then what you know now, what advice would you give your past self in relation to the collaborative response work?
That's a great question. I would say chill, just chill. I think I was very uptight and worried about, what do we have to change at Sunrise? How do I meet all these goals? How do I make sure that we're doing this? How do I keep central office happy with us? And it has been so much smoother than I expected. I know I went into meetings with Marilyn when we'd have discussions, or into meetings with you, Kurtis, going like, is this going to be what they wanted? Just chill out. This is all about, we're all working together to get somewhere with this. And it's been never, ever have I felt from Jigsaw, from our division, from staff, that anything has been, let's find what you're doing wrong and tell you. It's more just, what can we celebrate? And then how do we grow with that? And I think if you can just relax, embrace it, you will all get there. It's a journey. And sometimes some staff will go quicker than others. You will have definitely. And I think the bigger your staff, the more you're going to find those pockets of, they're not happy with this, but you jump on board with those who are and just keep moving forward. And eventually everyone's going to come on board because we have to. I think there's no other way around it here. So chill out a little. It'll be okay.
Oh, great answer.
Love it. So if any of our viewers or listeners had any questions or wanted to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to connect with you, Chris?
They can call the school directly. Sunrise School is 403-793-2025. Or they can send me an email. It's chris.zottl, which is ZOTTL, @grasslands.ab.ca. And I'm happy. I love hearing from other schools. I love, especially from other alternative schools. It's a smaller community, so it's great to be able to talk to them. And I mean, just expect, if you're going to call me to ask what we're doing, I'm going to probably pick you at what you've been doing too, to try to find some things so that I can tweak our building a little as well.
It's only fair.
Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure to include that in the show notes then as well. So, Chris, with that, thank you so much for your willingness to jump on. I know you shared with us before we started that you're fighting a bit of a cold, so thank you for persevering through this conversation, and more importantly, thank you for everything that you're doing for your staff, and most importantly, the students that are seeing success through the great work happening at Sunrise.
It was great
ahead.
spending a bit of time with you, Chris. Thanks so much.
Yes, it's been a while since I've seen you, Lorna, so that was
I
terrific. And I
know.
really appreciate being asked to do this, especially on behalf of alternative schools. I think sometimes we tend to feel like we get left out a little bit. And so it's very nice that you guys had that interest in that and wanted to hear that story and share it with others. And like I said, I'd love to hear from some other alternative outreach schools as well, and happy to share and collaborate beyond Grasslands. So thank you so much for giving me the chance.
We will be sharing this episode with other alternative
We should,
schools,
yeah.
as you're right. When you can create that community of schools dealing with similar challenges and successes, that just makes everyone stronger. All right, take care. Thank you so much, Chris.
See you
Thank you
soon.
guys. Great talking with you.
So, a chance to reflect on some key learnings from the
Yeah.
conversation with Chris.
It
And
was so great to see Chris. I haven't seen him for a while, so it
Well-
was wonderful to spend some time with him.
I also, and he noted it in the conversation, of we don't often get a chance to see this work being done
Mm.
at that alternative setting. It is a different context for
Yeah.
schools, and sometimes we have schools that it's difficult to envision what this could look like in that setting. So I think the work being done at Sunrise is a great example of how, even with a different focus for student success, different student clientele or context, and then smaller staff teams, we still need those intentional layers of team. And that came through really
Yeah.
clear, not just about meeting to enhance the communication, which is entirely valuable, but then still having that chance to explore pedagogy and ask what ifs and
Mhm.
push and challenge one another. During the collaborative team meeting, the level of vulnerability and safety experienced by that team was off the charts, and it 100% has to do with the modeling, the intentionality of the structures, and Chris's fidelity to the process.
For sure. The other thing for alternative settings is that, they have actually an advantage in that kids are coming to them with unique circumstances, and they have to address each and every individual
Oh, they
child
need a
that comes into
collaborative
their
response.
setting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in some ways, they already have that culture of, here's a child ahead of me, and how do I help them?
Yeah.
And how do I provide support for them going into this? And so that's a great thing that we've heard all the way through what
Mhm.
Chris has shared. But he talked too about, how we already had some of those conversations going
Yeah,
because of
some
the
of
setting.
I even spoke, we
Yeah.
felt like we had that layer well established already.
But then looking at, okay, what are the intentional structures that we do need? That doesn't mean every week we have to have
No.
each of those structures happening, but what is the structures that we need to ensure we're providing all the support that we should, but being really intentional in those structures. as
Well, and how they all align, how those
Mhm.
Thursday meetings connect to our collaborative team meetings, which then connect to next week in some collaborative planning time, putting actions into place and collecting data. Like, that's one of the things, is really seeing at Sunrise how those three foundational components that are essential for
Mhm.
collaboration
How they're
or for
connecting.
collaborative response, how they're connecting
Mhm.
together. And understanding, and Chris really exemplified this, that it's constantly going to be refining
Oh,
and evolving in time, and talking about, that little bit of apprehension
Yeah.
or
yeah.
anxiety of, we have to have all these pieces in place. Nah, chill.
Yeah.
To use his word,
Yeah.
chill. We're going to build and refine it out, where they're now at a place where it's a highly complex how
Yeah.
everything fits together within their school, but it didn't happen from the starting place. And I think that's a valuable lesson
Mhm.
for all of us to take away.
The other thing is the complexity within the school setting, but also across the division. He talked quite a bit about how the school division is working to use collaborative response in their levels of support as well. And so it not only is happening within the school supporting staff, but even at admin level where they're using collaborative response to work through key issues within multiple leaders, and then at the divisional level too. And he talked about that value of consistency because that is a common structure all the way across the division at every level, then there's some safety in that.
Well, the one word that's really stuck to me there was the idea of clarity. I clearly know what to expect when I come into each one of those. And that's, we know, is really, really important in this collaborative response work, is creating consistency, intentionality, and clarity. So I don't have to guess, well, what's going to happen in this
and really
time that we get together. There's clear structure.
Provides that psychological safety that we know is so important in getting to that innovative thinking.
Well, and if you don't have psychological safety in an alternative setting, such as Chris's school Sunrise, then how are you going to think outside the box? Because the way we traditionally respond hasn't worked for the kids that are coming to us. That's why they're coming to us. So if we don't have that psychological safety to think outside the box and to challenge one another and to say, I like that idea, but what if we did this? You'd have a hard time.
Yeah, for sure.
Surviving in that setting. And it was interesting, as he mentioned several times about having a chance to visit the school, the staff in that school, you could just see it exuded in the way they talked about the support they were providing for students, how they were shifting. And to a person, the ones that I talked to said, I can't see myself teaching in another setting again, because the one person referred to the challenges are extreme, but so are the rewards. The celebrations are all that much more meaningful for us. Just stakes are higher, and that means there's the challenging days are more challenging than we might expect, but the rewards and celebrations that come from that are moving.
It's so, we're so fortunate that we get to have these conversations because you can just hear Chris as he talks about the work that he does in his school and how passionate he is about both his staff and about his students there. And we're so lucky to be able to have these conversations with people who are so passionate.
So we'll encourage you, as always, to like, subscribe to the podcast. And in this one in particular, please share it out with a colleague that may be at an alternative setting and an alternate school, an outreach, whatever that looks like within your setting. Share it out with them, as I know that Chris definitely meant it in the episode of reach out. Loved a chance to connect. We also, as always, will include a code in the show notes for a discount off our collaborative response book, as well as some further resources. As always, reach out if there's questions that you have, insights that come to you from this episode, and please leave a comment or a review, as it helps to share out this work further. So until next time, we wish you all the best.
See you soon.
Join us again to continue to build your own capacity and leading collaborative response in your context.